Here comes a very trollish tune. This tune is the Schottis från Korsbäck from Österbotten in Finland, and it's known after Valter Enlund, who was the one who recorded it. And I have this tune thanks to my friend and colleague Peter Enroth, whom I met in Malung folkhögskola. We were students together. It is not a very hard tune. The melody is just about learning which note comes when, but then we'll have a little bit of fun looking at some details. But first, the A part. We start on a G. So here we really have a structure in A1, A2. Let's take it slowly. A1. And A2. Not much to say, let's get into the B part. We start on an open A, and we go. Here we really have a structure in B1, B2, B1 again, B3. Let's decompose that slowly. B1. B2. B1. And B3. And then there is a little difference when you play the B part the first time, like we just did, but the second time, instead of the long at the end, you will play one A and one G, just to get back to the A part. So if I take just B3, but the second time through the part, so in this tune, as in many other Schottises, we have a lot of these long, short, long rhythmical pattern. For example, in the very beginning, long, short, short, long, yam, ti, da, dam. And usually I play this pattern just down, up, down, up. So it's quite easy, it's quite simple, you don't have to think a lot, and it's a quite even pattern for your bow because you have one long in the down bow direction and then a short in the down bow direction, and you have a short in the up bow direction and then a long in the up bow direction. So it kind of neutralizes itself and you don't have any kind of problems of bow being too short in one direction or another. But the thing that is fun with this tune is to vary the rhythm a lot. And I discovered that when I got the original recording. And in this recording, the old musician who is playing, Valter Enlund, plays with a totally different rhythm. Hey, so instead of doing yam ti titam, he does yam ti yam ti yam ti yam most of the time, which is a rhythmical pattern that I call long, short, long, short, long, short, long. Not long, short, short, long, but long, short, long, short, long. Hey! Oh, oh! So for example, in the beginning of the B part, instead of yam ti yetam, you would get yam ti yam ti yam. And this pattern is a little bit more tricky in terms of bowing, because if you just play it down, up, down, you will have all the long bowings in one direction and all the short bowings in the other direction. And so you might end up having this kind of problem. And the bow is over, you don't have more bow, especially on Nyckelharpa with a short bow as we have. So if you are a bit more of an advanced player, usually you have learned how to compensate this kind of problems with speed and weight of the bow, this kind of things. But if you haven't yet learned that, it might be tricky, and I've seen it being tricky for many people who play this kind of pattern like that. What you can do is you can bind some notes together, and my favorite pattern for binding is to do 3 notes just down, up, down, and then bind 2, detach 2, bind 2, detach 2. Which gives this kind of pattern, if I play a little scale, so we're not thinking about the tune right now. Again. Down, up, down, up, up, down, up, down, down, up, up, and so on. This pattern will solve more or less the problem of the bow being too short, but it has an effect, which is that it will emphasize the backbeat quite a bit. If I exaggerate, and this is very modern. Is it bad? I don't think so. I think it's very cool, and there are actually some tunes, both old and new, which are like that, which have been played like that and probably composed like that or played like that for a very long time. And it's fine, and I like it. But maybe you don't want this feeling. Maybe you want something a little more traditional. I got you covered. The other possibility is to use what I call the old Schottis bowing. Doesn't really have a name, but it's been quite common in Sweden, in Finland, probably in Norway as well. And some people nowadays who try to play more in older styles still use this bowing, at least on some tunes. And it's the fact of binding the notes 2 and 2 across every half beat. Sounds very esoteric said like that, but I will write it on the screen and I will show you also. If I take my little scale again, I will do just 1 to start and then 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And when you listen to many old recordings, including the one of this tune, you can hear that it's been used. Sometimes just in some places, sometimes the whole way for the entire melody. And this tune especially works very well with this pattern. So you can actually play that pretty much all the way through. Yes, you have maybe to add a few notes here and there on the long notes, just separate them into two bowings, but then the arm really just goes back and forth and just never stops, except at the end of a part, which I think is a quite clever trick. It's like the Gaffer tape of Schottis. To fix all the bowing problems, you just do this. It's very cool for beginners, because then you don't have to think too much about the bowing patterns and it might be tricky and so on, and you can focus on the fingers, especially on the Nyckelharpa when you have some climbing or something, or if you want to play some ornaments, whatnot. But also it gives this kind of old-fashioned feeling that is also for me very trollish. That's the most trollish way. It's really yum da-dum 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 da-dum. It really gives this balancing effect, this kind of weird gate effect that I really, really like. So I would suggest practice this on a scale, then on a tiny part of the melody, and then try to put it in the entire tune, very consciously. It works, as said, pretty much all the way with this tune. For the ones of you who are a little bit confused with these different rhythms and patterns, let's play them one by one. So first, the one that I call long, short, short, long, which is the one I usually play. Tam, ti, ti, tam, if you prefer. Then the long, short, long, short, long, with the simplest but tricky bowing. Now with the bowing that is a little bit more modern, but solves the problem of the length of the bow. And now with the old type bowing. As you can hear, each different bowing, even if it's the same rhythm you're playing, will give a slightly different feeling. The old detached will be, well, a little bit like hammering somehow. Da, 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 da. You know, it's a little bit hacked somehow, but it can be an effect if you want it very jumpy. As said, the more modern one will give a little bit more of a jazzy backbeat feeling. Da, 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 you know? And the old one will give a bit more of a balancing effect. Is there one that is better? I don't think so. I like them all. I like both rhythms, and I like all the different bowing patterns. I think that one should not cast them aside because they are newer or because they sound old. I think they just add more variety to a tune, a quite simple melody, not super hard, not super complicated, but suddenly it's just so much richer just because we have a bit of fun with the rhythm and the bow. I also think this tune is a very interesting example of a kind of shift that is happening that I've noticed. I have no evidence, like scientific evidence, to back up this claim, but I've noticed that many tunes that were played in all recordings as long, short, long, short, long, short, long, have started to be played a little bit more, especially by younger people, like long, short, short, long, long, short, short, long. And I think it might be because the long, short, short, long is a little bit more modern. It's a little bit more backbeat feeling, it has a little bit more of a jazzy, like dynamic feeling, while the long, short, long, short, long, short, long is maybe a little bit too easy, or I don't know. It's just my wild guess about this. There were already old tunes which were played with long, short, short, long, and there are new tunes and modern young people who play with the old rhythmical pattern, if you want. But I feel there is a little bit of a shift that is happening nowadays. Again, I don't think it's a bad thing. Folk music is the music of the people, and it's constantly evolving. What is interesting is just to research the things and be aware of how it was before and how it's changing, and to learn different things to broaden our music. Which is really what I encourage you to do. Have fun with these patterns, experiment with them, try them on other tunes as well. And when you play with someone who has a slightly different version than yours, try to learn it, because then it's, again, as I very often say, one more tool in your toolbox for your own music. It makes music more interesting to play and to listen to. And they are all very good for dancing, all these patterns, so win-win. If you would like to get the sheet music for this tune, with both rhythms and with all the different bowing patterns I have demonstrated in this video, I give sheet music for each tune I teach in these videos exclusively on my Patreon, link in the description, and very huge thanks to my patrons, by the way, for their support. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, share the video with your musical friends. For my part, I will go back to dancing with the trolls.